The steam rose from the coffee pot as Mai poured another cup for the businessman in seat 12. It was barely 7 a.m., and the golden griddle was already buzzing with its usual morning energy. She'd been doing this for 8 years now, not counting the college summers, and sometimes she still couldn't believe this was her life at 35. "Order up," called out Mrs. Kim from the kitchen window, her voice carrying over the clinking of plates and morning chatter. 2 plates of blueberry pancakes with extra butter on the side. That would be for the retired couple who came in every Monday. May knew their order by heart, just like she knew most of her regulars' preferences. The morning light streamed through the large windows, catching the silver of the napkin holders and the chrome trim of the counter. She grabbed the plates, feeling their warmth through her palms. As she walked to table 7, she noticed her art degree hanging crooked on the wall near the entrance. The owner had insisted on displaying it, saying it gave the place culture. Sometimes she wished he hadn't. "Here you go, Mr. and Mrs. Lee," she said, setting down the steaming plates. "Fresh off the griddle, just how you like them." Mrs. Lee's eyes crinkled with delight as she reached for the syrup. "You remembered the extra butter," Mr. Lee noted with a pleased nod. "Nobody takes care of us like you do." Mai smiled, though her feet were already aching in her comfortable but well-worn shoes. The morning rush was in full swing now. A young mom struggled through the door with twins in a stroller, while 3 construction workers in orange vests claimed their usual spots at the counter. Between refilling coffee cups and taking orders, Mai found herself doing what she always did: drawing. Little doodles on the corners of order pads, quick sketches on napkins for kids to keep them entertained. Her hands seemed to move on their own, creating tiny works of art that would end up in the trash or, on good days, stuck to someone's fridge. The kitchen radio played old songs that mixed with the sizzle of bacon and the whir of the milkshake machine. Someone had spilled orange juice in aisle 3. The toast for table 5 was burning. A new customer needed mayonnaise. This was her dance, and she knew every step by heart. During a brief quiet moment, she caught her reflection in the chrome coffee machine. Her black hair was escaping its neat bun, and there was a small splash of syrup on her blue uniform. 8 years ago, she'd thought this job would be temporary. Just something to pay the bills while she built her art portfolio. Now the portfolio sat in a drawer at home, gathering dust along with her dreams of gallery openings. "Hey, dreamer," called out Mrs. Kim. "Table 9 needs their check." May snapped back to attention, grabbing her order pad. As she walked to table 9, she noticed one of her napkin drawings, a quick sketch of the city skyline, peeking out from under a half-eaten plate of eggs. The customer, a middle-aged woman in a business suit, was staring at it with interest. The morning continued its familiar rhythm. More coffee, more pancakes, more quick smiles, and "Can I get you anything else?" But something felt different today. Maybe it was the way the businesswoman had looked at her drawing. Maybe it was the weight of that art degree on the wall. Or maybe it was just time for something to change. As she cleared table 9, May found a note scribbled on the receipt along with a generous tip. "Your art made my morning better." She folded the receipt carefully and tucked it into her pocket, next to her order pad and her collection of pens perfect for sketching. The bell of the door chimed again. Another customer. Another order to take. Another chance to make someone's day a little brighter, even if it wasn't quite the way she'd imagined doing it all those years ago. But today, somehow, that felt okay. Maybe even more than okay. Every Tuesday and Thursday, like clockwork, the old man with the leather briefcase would arrive at exactly 9:15 a.m., after the morning rush had settled. He always chose the same corner booth by the window, where the light was best for reading. Mai had started calling him Mr. 915 in her head, though she'd never learned his actual name. Today, he walked in wearing his usual gray suit, slightly wrinkled at the elbows, carrying that worn briefcase stuffed with papers. His wire-rimmed glasses caught the morning light as he settled into his spot. Without needing to ask, Mai brought over a cup of green tea and a glass of water with lemon. "The usual?" she asked, though she was already writing it down. 1 slice of wheat toast, 2 soft-boiled eggs, and a small bowl of fresh fruit. He looked up from his papers and smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling behind his glasses. "You know me too well," he said, then paused. "Actually, there's something different about the menu today." Mai felt her cheeks warm slightly. She'd gotten bored during the slow afternoon shift yesterday and had decorated the margins of the laminated menus with tiny sketches. Coffee cups with steam that turned into birds, forks dancing with spoons, pancakes wearing tiny top hats. "Oh, I'm sorry about that," she started to say, reaching for the menu, but he waved her off. No, no. These are wonderful." He adjusted his glasses, studying the drawings more closely. "Did you do these?" She nodded, suddenly feeling like she was back in art school, presenting her work for critique. "Just some doodles. I get carried away sometimes." The old man pulled out a particular paper from his briefcase, and Mai noticed it was covered in what looked like floor plans. "You know," he said, "I've been coming here for months, and I never knew we had an artist serving my breakfast." "Oh, I wouldn't say." Mai began, but was interrupted by a crash from the kitchen. Mrs. Kim had dropped a stack of plates, and the sound of shattering ceramic filled the diner. "I'll be right back with your order," Mai said quickly, hurrying to help with the cleanup. As she knelt to sweep up the broken pieces, she could feel Mr. 915's eyes following her, thoughtful and considering. When she returned with his breakfast 15 minutes later, he had spread several papers across the table. They weren't just floor plans, they were gallery layouts. Mi's heart did a little jump as she set down his plate. "These drawings," he said, pointing to her menu doodles again. "They remind me of something I've been trying to solve. You see, I own a small gallery downtown, and we've been missing something in our approach. Something human." Mai stood there, coffee pot forgotten in her hand as he continued. "Tell me, what made you start drawing on these menus?" She thought about it, absent-mindedly refilling his water glass. "I guess I wanted to make people smile. Sometimes people come in here so tired, so wrapped up in their problems. If a silly little drawing of a pancake wearing a hat makes them laugh, even for a second." He nodded, as if she confirmed something he'd been thinking. "That's exactly what we're missing. We've become too formal, too distant." He took a bite of his toast, chewing thoughtfully. "Would you be interested in seeing the gallery sometime? Perhaps we cooled." The bell above the door chimed, and a group of office workers poured in, all talking loudly about some deadline. Mi glanced apologetically at Mr. 915. "I have to." "Go, go," he said, waving her off with a kind smile. "I'll be here next Tuesday. Same time. Perhaps we can continue this conversation." For the rest of her shift, Mai felt lighter somehow, as if those tiny doodles had opened a door she thought had been permanently closed. She caught herself humming as she served plates of eggs and refilled coffee cups, her mind wandering to the possibilities that lay behind that door. When Mr. 915 left, he placed his usual tip on the table, but underneath it was his business card. On the back, he'd written, "Art belongs everywhere, even on diner menus. Let's talk about putting yours somewhere more permanent." Mai slipped the card into her pocket, right next to yesterday's receipt with its encouraging note. Maybe, just maybe, her art degree wasn't gathering as much dust as she'd thought. The gallery was nothing like Mai had imagined. She'd pictured something sleek and intimidating, with stark white walls and echoing silence. Instead, she found herself in a warm space filled with natural light and wooden floors that creaked pleasantly under her feet. It was early morning, 2 hours before her diner shift, and the space smelled of fresh coffee and possibility. Mr. 915, whose real name she now knew but still couldn't bring herself to use, had called with unexpected news. His gallery manager had suddenly moved across the country for family reasons, leaving him in a bind with an upcoming exhibition. "I need someone with fresh eyes and a human touch," he'd said. "Someone who understands how art speaks to everyday people." Now, standing in the gallery's back office, Mai stared at the exhibition planning calendar on the wall. Red marks and sticky notes covered the next 3 weeks, leading up to the opening night. Her hands, used to carrying plates and writing orders, fidgeted with the hem of her jacket, the nice one she'd bought for job interviews years ago. "The setup starts next week," the old man explained, pouring them both coffee in proper mugs, not the thick diner ones she was used to. "We'll need to arrange the pieces, design the flow of the space, handle the lighting." He looked at her over his glasses. "Think you can balance this with your shifts at the diner?" Mai thought about her schedule, about Mrs. Kim, and the morning rushes, about bills to pay and dreams to chase. "I'll make it work," she said, surprising herself with how firm her voice sounded. The next few days blurred together like watercolors in the rain. She'd work the morning shift at the diner, rush to the gallery during her break to make calls and review layouts, then head back for the afternoon crowd. Her feet ached more than usual, and she started carrying an extra shirt to change into between jobs. Mrs. Kim noticed, of course. She always noticed everything. "You look tired," she said one morning, sliding an extra egg onto May's own breakfast plate. "But your eyes are brighter." The diner regulars stepped up in their own ways. The businesswoman who'd left that first note about May's art started coming in during slower hours, so they could chat while Mai refilled sugar dispensers. The retired couple offered to spread the word of the upcoming exhibition to their art-loving friends. One particularly exhausting evening, as Mai was reviewing artist statements on her phone while restocking napkins, she heard Mrs. Kim's voice from the kitchen. "Go home early today." "But the closing shift." "We handle it," Mrs. Kim said firmly, wiping her hands on her apron. "You have gallery work, yes? We help. Family helps family." Mai felt her throat tighten as she looked around at the familiar faces. Mrs. Kim with her knowing smile, the evening regulars nodding in agreement, even the new busboy giving her a thumbs up. This place had been more than just a job for 8 years. These people had been more than just customers and coworkers. At the gallery, things were equally intense, but in a different way. Mai found herself drawing on unexpected skills learned from years of waitressing. She could read people's expressions the same way she'd learned to spot a customer needing a refill. She knew how to make guests feel welcome, how to guide them through choices, how to handle multiple tasks while keeping a smile on her face. Her menu doodles evolved into sketches for the exhibition layout. She arranged and rearranged the space in her mind like she was choreographing a dance between tables. The lighting designs came naturally. After all, she knew how important good lighting was from years of customers squinting at menus. Late one night, as she sat in the gallery surrounded by half-unpacked artwork and installation plans, Mr. 915 brought her a cup of tea. "You're doing good work here," he said simply. "Very good work." Mai looked down at her hands, still rough from carrying plates, now smudged with pencil marks from sketching display ideas. They were the same hands, she realized, just being used in a different way. Maybe that's what dreams were really about, not leaving everything behind, but bringing the best parts with you into something new. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, sitting innocently among the bills and flyers on the diner's counter. Mai watched the owner's face change as he read it, his normally cheerful expression falling like a souffle taken out of the oven too soon. "They're tripling the rent," he announced to the staff after closing time, his voice heavy with worry. "The whole block is being redeveloped." He made air quotes with his fingers, trying to smile but failing. "They're giving us 3 months." The news spread through the diner like spilled coffee. Regulars who'd been coming for decades hugged their coffee cups a little tighter. The construction workers who came every morning started bringing in local newspaper clippings about other businesses facing similar fates. Even the pigeons that usually pecked hopefully at crumbs near the entrance seemed to sense the change in the air. Mai felt the weight of it all while balancing her two worlds. At the gallery, things were coming together beautifully. The exhibition was taking shape, with her ideas about lighting and arrangement drawing praise from the old man. But her heart ached every time she put on her blue diner uniform, knowing each shift brought them closer to the end. One morning, as she was setting up for the breakfast rush, the businesswoman who'd first noticed her napkin art stopped her. "I heard of the rent situation," she said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "You know, I work in commercial real estate. Maybe we cooled." A crash from the kitchen interrupted them. Mrs. Kim had dropped a pan, but this time it wasn't an accident. She stood in the kitchen doorway, hands on her hips, looking fiercer than Mai had ever seen her. "This place," Mrs. Kim declared, "is not just building. Is home. Is family." She looked around at everyone. The regulars, the staff, even the delivery guy who'd stopped in the doorway. "We fight." And fight they did. The retired couple started a petition. The college students who came in for late-night study sessions created a social media campaign. The construction workers spread the word to every job site in the city. Even Mr. 915, during his regular breakfast visits, started making calls to old friends in the city council. Meanwhile, Mai found herself staying late at the gallery one evening, surrounded by the artwork she was helping to arrange. Her eyes kept drifting to a particular piece, a painting of an old neighborhood cafe, its windows glowing warm against a dark city background. Something clicked in her mind. She pulled out her sketchbook, the one she'd been using to plan the exhibition layout, and started drawing. The diner appeared on the page, but not just as a building. She drew the morning light streaming through its windows, the steam rising from coffee cups, Mrs. Kim's determined smile, the construction worker's muddy boots, the businesswoman's perfectly pressed suit, all the pieces of life that made the place what it was. The next morning, she showed the sketch to Mr. 915 during his usual breakfast. He studied it for a long time, his tea growing cold beside him. "You know," he said finally, "art isn't just about what hangs on gallery walls. Sometimes it's about preserving what matters most." He tapped the sketch thoughtfully. "What if we could tell this story? Not just the diner's story, but the story of all these small places that give a city its soul." Mai looked around the diner, at the crooked art degree on the wall, at the regulars in their usual spots, at Mrs. Kim teaching the new busboy how to fold napkins just right. Success had always seemed like something that would take her away from all this. But maybe, just maybe, it could be about bringing everything together instead. She pulled out her order pad and started sketching again, this time with a different kind of order in mind. The diner needed saving, yes, but maybe it also needed something more. A new way of seeing itself, a new way of showing the world its worth. And perhaps the answer had been right in front of her all along, in every cup of coffee served and every small kindness shared across the counter. The back room of the gallery became Mi's sanctuary after her diner shifts. She'd change out of her blue uniform, pull out her art supplies, and let her memories flow onto canvas. Each painting told a story that had been 8 years in the making, though she hadn't realized she'd been collecting them all this time. There was the early morning piece, steam rising from coffee cups like dreams taking flight, painted in soft grays and golds. The window light caught the tiredness in people's faces, but also the hope of a new day. She'd seen that look 1,000 times, serving first cups of coffee to people starting their day. "Your brush strokes," the old man said one evening, watching her work, "they move like you do when you're serving tables." He wasn't wrong. Years of weaving between chairs and navigating crowded spaces had taught her about flow and movement in ways art school never had. She painted Mrs. Kim in the kitchen, her strong hands kneading dough in the early morning light. The painting captured not just her image, but the strength and warmth she brought to the diner every day. When Mrs. Kim saw it, she stood silent for a long moment, then quietly wiped her eyes with her apron. "You see us," she said simply. "Really see us." The retired couple appeared in a piece about afternoon light and crossword puzzles, their heads bent together over coffee cups and shared memories. The construction workers became a study in orange vests and tired smiles, their muddy boots leaving traces of the city's growth on the diner's worn floor. Between paintings, Maya still served plates of eggs and refilled coffee cups. But now she saw each moment differently, not as time passing, but as stories waiting to be told. The businesswoman's laptop casting a blue glow on her face during late breakfasts. The young mom trying to cut pancakes one-handed while holding her baby. The delivery guy sneaking treats to the stray cat behind the diner. Word began to spread about her work. Mr. 915 had placed one of her paintings, the one of the morning light through the diner windows, in the gallery's front room. People would stop and stare, seeing something of their own lives reflected in the brushstrokes. "It reminds me of the place my grandfather used to take me for breakfast," one visitor said, his voice thick with memory. "That's exactly how it feels to work the morning shift," said another, a waitress from across town who'd come to see the exhibition. Late one night, as Maya was putting the finishing touches on a painting of the diner's neon sign reflected in a rain puddle, the old man brought her a cup of tea. He studied the growing collection of canvases lining the walls of the back room. "You know," he said carefully, "these aren't just paintings of a diner. They're about something more." Mai stepped back from her easel, really looking at what she'd created. Each canvas captured something different. Dignity in work, warmth in community, beauty in the everyday moments most people rushed past without seeing. All the things she'd learned while carrying plates and taking orders. "People think diners are just about food," she said, wiping a smudge of paint from her hands. "But they're really about connections. About having a place where you belong, even if it's just for the length of a cup of coffee." She looked at her latest piece, still wet on the easel. It showed the whole diner staff, not just their faces, but their stories. Mrs. Kim's strength, the busboy's youth, the owner's worried smile these days. The painting somehow captured both what was and what might be lost. The old man nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes," he said, "it takes an artist to show people what they've been looking at all along." He gestured to the paintings. "These aren't just about saving a diner. They're about saving a piece of the city's heart." Maid picked up her brush again, dipping it in a warm golden color like morning light through the diner's windows. She had more stories to tell, more moments to capture. And maybe, just maybe, these paintings could do more than just hang on gallery walls. Maybe they could help save the place that had inspired them. The envelope sat unopened on May's small kitchen table, the Los Angeles Gallery's logo gleaming in the corner. It had arrived that morning, just before her shift started. The job offer inside, she knew what it was without opening it, represented everything she'd once dreamed about. A full-time position managing one of the biggest galleries on the West Coast. A real art world career. She'd left it there all day while she worked her usual shift at the diner. Now, in the quiet of her apartment, the sound of city traffic humming outside her window, she couldn't bring herself to open it. The diner had 2 months left before the rent increase would force it to close. The owner had aged years and weeks, his normally cheerful face lined with worry. That morning, he'd had to tell the young busboy to start looking for other work, just in case. Her phone buzzed. A message from the gallery. A critic from an important art magazine had visited that afternoon. They loved her diner series. Words like authentic and powerful floated across her screen. The kind of recognition she dreamed about during all those years of art school. The businesswoman had been in for lunch earlier, talking about potential investors she'd contacted. "The diner has history," she'd said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "People care about that now. Maybe if we could prove its cultural value." Mina got up and walked to her easel by the window. Her latest painting was still unfinished. A view of the diner's counter from behind, showing the whole length of it. Every regular spot was there. The construction workers' coffee cups leaving rings on the counter. The retired couple's shared newspaper. The businesswoman's laptop. Mr. 915's green tea and papers. 8 years of mornings captured in paint. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Mrs. Kim, sending a photo of a newspaper article about another local restaurant that had been saved by community action. "We not give up." Read the message below it. The Los Angeles job would mean a real salary, health insurance, a proper art world career, everything she thought she wanted when she first hung that art degree on the diner's wall. But as she stood there, looking at her unfinished painting, different images filled her mind. Mrs. Kim teaching her how to tell when the eggs were perfectly done just by sound. The retired couple bringing her soup when she had the flu last winter. The construction workers who'd helped her change a flat tire in the parking lot one rainy morning. The sun was setting now, painting her small apartment in the same golden light she loved to capture in her diner paintings. She walked back to the kitchen table and picked up the envelope. The paper was thick, expensive. It felt like a ticket to a different life. Then her eyes fell on her order pad, sitting next to her keys. She'd absent-mindedly doodled on it during her break. Tiny sketches of her diner family. Mrs. Kim's determined smile. The owner's gentle hands. The busboy's hopeful young face. She thought about what Mr. 915 had said when she first showed him her diner paintings. Sometimes the most important art isn't about escape. It's about helping people see the beauty in what's right in front of them. The evening light caught the edge of the envelope, making it shine like a promise. But promises came in many forms, didn't they? Some were written on expensive paper in fancy logos. Others were written in coffee stains and shared meals, in morning light and simple kindness. Mai reached for her phone. Before opening the envelope, she needed to make a call. Not to Los Angeles, but to the small office above the gallery where she knew Mr. 915 would still be working. She had an idea. One that might save more than just her art career. Because maybe success wasn't about choosing between two worlds. Maybe it was about bringing them together in a way nobody had thought of before. She looked at the envelope again, and for the first time all day, she smiled. Sometimes, the hardest choices were the clearest ones, once you knew what really mattered. 6 months later, the morning light streamed through the diner's windows, catching on something new. Artwork hanging on walls that had been recently repainted. The old booths were still there, worn and comfortable as ever, but now they sat beneath paintings that told stories of city life, of morning coffee, of community. The sign outside read, "The Golden Griddle Gallery and Diner," in freshly painted letters. Inside, the smell of coffee and bacon mingled with the subtle scent of art supplies and fresh paint. Mai moved between the tables, coffee pot in hand, wearing not her old blue uniform, but a simple black apron over casual clothes. She stopped to adjust a painting. One of her newer pieces showing the city skyline at dawn, viewed through the diner's windows. "More coffee, please," called the art student sitting in the corner booth, her sketchbook open beside her plate of pancakes. She'd been coming in every morning for weeks, drawing the regulars while she ate her breakfast, just like May used to do. The merger had been Mr. 915's idea, sparked by May's late-night phone call 6 months ago. "Why choose?" He'd said. "Let's create something new." The businesswoman had helped with the paperwork, turning the diner into a cooperative owned by its workers. The construction workers had pitched in after hours, helping to renovate the space while keeping its soul intact. Now, one wall served as a rotating gallery for local artists. The counter still hosted its regular breakfast crowd, but the space behind it displayed artwork for sale. Mrs. Kim's cooking drew food critics and art lovers alike, and she'd started teaching cooking classes in the afternoons when the lunch rush died down. The retired couple had their usual booth, but now they led weekly art appreciation discussions over coffee and pie. The businesswoman had started a mentorship program, connecting young artists with business skills they'd need. Even the busboy was learning about art handling between serving tables, his eyes bright with new possibilities. "Your usual spot is ready," Mai told Mr. 915 as he walked in, right on time. But instead of sitting alone with his papers, He joined a table of gallery owners from across the city, all curious about this unique space that was making waves in the art world. Tell them how it happened, he encouraged, and Mai found herself pulling up a chair, the coffee pot settled comfortably in her hand. It started with napkin drawings, she began, and watched their faces soften as she told the story. Not just her story, but the story of a place that had refused to choose between what it was and what it could become. The morning light caught the steam rising from coffee cups, turning it golden, just like in her paintings. Through the windows, she could see people stopping to look at the artwork displayed there, some stepping inside drawn by the warm light and delicious smells. An art magazine lay open on the counter, featuring an article about innovative gallery spaces. The Golden Griddle was there, praised not just for its art, but for its heart. A space that serves both hunger and soul, the critic had written. Mai liked that, but she liked Mrs. Kim's description better. Now we feed people two ways. The door chimed as new customers entered. A mix of art lovers and breakfast seekers, all welcome. Mai picked up her coffee pot, ready to make her rounds. Her paintings watched over the scene from the walls, but the real masterpiece was happening below them. In the clinking of cups, the murmur of conversations, the scratch of pencils on sketchbooks, the sizzle of bacon from the kitchen. She'd kept her art degree on the wall, but now that hung among other things. Local artists' work, community awards, newspaper articles about this unique space. Next to it was her first napkin drawing, framed not for its artistic merit, but for what it represented. The moment someone saw the beauty in small things. The morning rush was beginning, a familiar dance in a transformed space. Mai had moved through it all with the grace of someone who had found her place. Not by choosing one world over another, but by bringing them together. She filled coffee cups beneath paintings that told stories of everyday life, each one a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful art isn't hung on walls, but lived in moments shared across a counter, in morning light, in the simple act of serving both coffee and dreams.